The first canto describes Savitri's coming back to her father's court to report to him what had happened, that she had met this young man and she decided to marry him. In fact, as we just now saw, she is already married to him in what may be known as the Gandharva system, and she just has to go back and report to her father. But as the original story has it, his father at that time finds that he has a visitor. This visitor is Devarshi Narad, who has the uncanny habit of being present when he is least expected. And as we all remember, as little kids, in all Puranic stories, our favorite character used to be Narad. When things got a little dull, insipid, when Narad arrived, is an announcement, get ready for some action. That's what it always meant. In all the Puranic stories, he has a very important role, as you will see, that whenever there is a higher harmony that has to be achieved, wherever there is a hidden conflict that has to be resolved, Narad comes to bring issues to a head so that the issue can be resolved and a higher harmony can be reached. So this is what he always does. He always, in some sense, is an emissary of fate. Whenever anybody's resolution is to be strengthened, you find him there doing things which our earthly wisdom would say he should not have done. But ultimately, in hindsight, you realize that because he did what he did or he said what he said, things turned out the way they did. So here too, as the original story says, Savitri finds Narad in her father's court. Now, Sri Aurobindo has generally been very close to the story. He doesn't introduce any upakhyanas, any additional story material. But here, this entire dialogue, which will come up in Canto 2 between Savitri's mother and Narad, you will not find in the original Mahabharata story. This is something which Sri Aurobindo develops it, where you have such important problems like fate, evil, pain. What are these? How do they arise? What purpose do they serve? Things of this kind are discussed in some detail. But you must bear in mind, this is not a philosophical treatise. Sri Aurobindo has a metaphysical, philosophical answer to this question in the Life Divine. He doesn't repeat that here in a poetic form. This poetry has a different function. Some aspects are brought out, highlighted. We'll come to that when we talk about Canto 2. So Canto 2 is very important, but Canto 1 is very dramatic. And he begins by introducing this singer from the heavens. Narad, the heavenly sage from paradise, is being introduced. And this is, as I said, an incredibly rich canto. And any amount of time you are willing to spend on this canto, you will find is very, very rewarding. People who have looked at this particular canto have said a number of very interesting things and important things about it. But I don't think in our enterprise, which is all one mad rush to beat the clock, we'll be able to spend any time talking about these things. However, I will indicate some of these as I go along. So, it begins very simply in silent bounds, bordering the mortal's plain, crossing a wide expanse of brilliant space. Narad, the heavenly sage from paradise came chanting through the large and lustrous air. Now as Narad is coming down, you will see the themes of which he is singing, the change, the tone changes, and that is described very beautifully here. And at the same time, on this very page 415, there is an implication of the various steps in physical creation. How was this world created? That also is indicated, particularly from lines like, across an intangible border of soul space, he passed from mind into material things, amid the inventions of the inconscient self and the workings of a blind somnambulist force. Below him, circling burned the myriad suns. He bore the ripples of the etheric sea. Talks about ether, he talks about air, he talks about fire, he talks about water, he talks about earth. These are the Pancha Mahabhutas out of which this earth was made, this material creation was made, and there is kind of implicit reference to these in these lines, but I guess we just have time to indicate this. I don't have time to develop this here, but we'll go on to the next point, which is a little more direct, easier to appreciate, on page 416, about 6 lines from the top. Says, a change now fell upon the singer's mood. As Narad was coming down, he underwent a change in mood, and the themes and songs that he sang, they also changed. A rapture and a pathos moved his voice. Naturally, when you come near the earth, there is a rapture and a pathos. As I have been saying here repeatedly, man is the most tragic of God's creations. Man, as he is poised between the beasts and the gods, doesn't have the innocence of beasts, doesn't have the perfection of the gods. He has been blessed or accursed with the mind and all the complications that mind has given rise to, as a result of which human being is the most tragic of these, and therefore pathos is a constant companion of human life. But also there is this rapture, because if perfection is going to be realized anywhere at all, it is going to be realized here on earth. So earth is the scene where perfection, God's perfection, is going to be realized. All the other worlds, whatever their beauty, whatever their strength, they are all in some sense frozen typal worlds. This is the only world which is full of imperfections, and yet which is the only world where there is scope for evolution. And that's why rapture, the future that is already implicit here on earth for man, for this creation, and pathos for the current existential struggle that man has been waging. So Narad's songs now primarily are along these two lines. One is he talks about the rapture and the pathos. A rapture and a pathos moved his voice. He sang no more of light that never wanes, and oneness and pure everlasting bliss. As he's coming down Vaikuntha, you see, these are all things that happen in Vaikuntha, we are told. Oneness and bliss and so on. But where is oneness and bliss here on our earth? So, as he comes down, the earth atmosphere changes him. He sang no more of light that never wanes, and oneness and pure everlasting bliss. He sang no more that deathless heart of love. His chant was a hymn of ignorance and fate. He sang the name of Vishnu and the birth and joy and passion of the mystic world, and how the stars were made and life began, and the mute region stirred with the throb of a soul. He sang the inconscient and its secret self, its power of omnipotent knowing not what it does, all shaping without will or thought or sense, its blind and erring occult mystery, and darkness yearning towards the eternal light. That's what this struggle on earth is. Darkness yearning towards eternal light, and love that broods within the dim abyss and waits the answer of the human heart, and death that climbs to immortality. Few lines down the page, he sang of the glory and marvel still to be born, of Godhead throwing off at last its veil, of bodies made divine and life made bliss, immortal sweetness clasping immortal might, heart sensing heart, thought looking straight at thought, and the delight when every barrier falls, and the transfiguration and the ecstasy. And as he sang, when he sang of this great future, just now described, that is awaiting earth, and as he sang, the poet says, the demons swept with joy. All the demons, all the asuras who are waiting to be transformed, they wept with joy, because Narad was talking about this future. In this future, all these demons, all the asuras would be transformed. And this is the great future, the bright future lying ahead for this earth, about which Narad is singing. And therefore the poet says, and the transfiguration and the ecstasy, and as he sang, the demons wept with joy, foreseeing the end of their long, dreadful task. They have been appointed to their long and dreadful task. They are not too happy doing this task, but the divine has said, you will be the examiner, you will be a very stiff examiner. That's what the demons and asuras are doing. And if they find more than 2 spelling mistakes, they just throw the script out of the window. No chance of your passing. We want them to be lenient. This is what it is, and they are not. This is the job of death. This is the job of all the so-called hostile powers in some sense. In the Indian way of looking at things, there is nothing really hostile to the divine. Divine is the absolute supreme reality. So you can't bring in some other power, you can't kind of smuggle in some other power who can defy God. There is nothing here which can defy God. If there is evil, or if, as you will see in the next canto, we'll talk about it in some detail, they are all appointed by the divine for a specific purpose. They have to fulfill in the present conditions of the earth, and therefore, as he sang, the demons swept with joy, foreseeing the end of their long, dreadful task, and the defeat for which they hoped in vain. They all been waiting to be defeated by man, that man will be able to overcome them, transcend them, but they are disappointed. This is the idea. They hoped, and the defeat for which they hoped in vain, and the glad release from their self-chosen doom, and return into the one from whom they came. They would like to go back to where they came from and resume their normal activity of adoration of the divine and not of hostility to the divine. They are appointed here to be hostiles at the divine's command, as it were, until the necessity for such hostility remains. A few lines down that same page, now he sees, as he is coming very close to the earth, and he sees in the distance Ashwapati's palace, King Ashwapati's palace to the winds in Madra, flowering up in delicate stone. There welcomed him the sage and thoughtful king. At his side a creature beautiful, passionate, wise, aspiring like a sacrificial flame, skyward from its earth seat through luminous air, queen-browed, the human mother of Savitri. So, Ashwapati and Ashwapati's wife, whose name is not mentioned here, and I learnt from our friend Dr. Deshpande's article, her name is Malavi. She by his side sitting there and welcoming the great sage. Now, as I said, this should be enough to indicate what kinds of things Sri Aurobindo can pack these lines with. There is no canto in one sense he hasn't taken seriously. Every canto, he might have spent lots of time on some parts, not enough time in other parts, but wherever his hand has worked, it has worked wonders, and particularly here, even the small event like Narad's coming down. As you can see, Savitri is not a book for people in a hurry. Oh, just tell me how did Narad come back? How did Narad come? You can say in one line, Narad came from here to here, that's about all. But how he came, what he sang about, what effect the song had on the elementary forces, all these things he describes in great detail. On page 418, even as he sang and rapture stole through earth time, and caught the heavens, came with a call of hoofs, as of a swift heart hastening Savitri. He was just seated there in the court, received, and he was seated in the court, Ashwapati, his wife, and they were about to ask him about what do you ask Narad? He is a kind of commuter between the earth and heaven. Do you ask, how is God? What kind of question do you ask him? How is Vishnu these days? That kind of thing. So they are going to talk to him about things. Suddenly they hear the hooves of the chariot horses. Her radiant tread glimmered across the floor, a happy wonder in her fathomless gaze. Chained by the halo of her love, she came. Savitri, who is now coming back, is a transformed Savitri. She is a fulfilled Savitri, fulfilled by love. So he says, her radiant tread glimmered across the floor, a happy wonder in her fathomless gaze. Chained by the halo of her love, she came. Her eyes rich with a shining mist of joy, as one who comes from a heavenly embassy, discharging the proud mission of her heart, one carrying the sanction of the gods to her love and its luminous eternity. She stood before her mighty Father's throne, and eager for beauty on discovered earth, transformed and new in her heart's miracle light, saw like a rose of marvel worshipping the fire-tinged sweetness of the Son of Heaven. Then Sri Aurobindo doesn't leave any opportunity of describing Savitri. There are at least 5 long descriptions of Savitri. One later on as seen by the god of death. One we read yesterday as Ashwapati sees her. Remember, talked about when Ashwapati hears this voice asking man to rise beyond his limitations and so on. By the time the voice is finished speaking, he sees Savitri approaching him. That's an opportunity. Sri Aurobindo sees this and describes Savitri in great detail. It's the second description. In Canto 2, when Savitri woke that morning along with everyone else and got busy with her work, there is a long description of Savitri. Then there is a description of Savitri as the Supreme Mother, where you have, O strong forerunner, I have heard thy cry. There is a long description of the supreme form of Savitri as the Divine Mother. But here, this is a different description of Savitri. Savitri as a maiden fulfilled by love. And I don't think any other poet could have written this kind of a description. I don't think Shakespeare or Keats or anybody, only somebody who is drenched with Kalidas, drenched in the Indian tradition of poetry could have written this. But nobody has this perfection, command over English, so only Sri Aurobindo can combine these. He has drunk deep at the very fountainhead of Sanskrit poetry, Indian tradition, Indian aesthetics, and he is the only one who has the gift to translate it into English. Now what happens is, the reason that he is not trying to do in English what an English poet does is very often held against him as a blemish. because he is not doing in English what an English poet does. But he is not trying to do that. There are a number of people who are doing that. He is trying to do in English something totally different. Even it comes to this kind of poetry, he wants to bring to the English language different kind of expressiveness, an expressiveness of a quintessentially Indian sensibility. Somehow our minds are such that when you see English, you are expected to express through English an English sensibility. We are Indians. English sensibility is alien to us. When you try to do that, it becomes neither Indian nor English. We fall between these two. But Sri Aurobindo sticks to the Indian sensibility, and he has the command over the language. So in the process, he creates a new aesthetics, he creates a new language, and this is what has baffled people. Oh, this is something I have never read. Palgrave's golden treasury of English poetry, nowhere anything like this. Tennyson didn't write like this, Swinburne didn't write like this, Browning didn't. He wasn't writing like anyone else. He was writing like Sri Aurobindo. It's a different kind of poetry. And that's what you see here. He is describing in gorgeous words this Savitri who is now approaching him, a different Savitri. Who is this that comes, the bride? A few lines from where we left off. Who is this that comes, the bride, the flame-born, and round her illumined head, pouring their lights, her hymeneal pomps move flashing about her. From what green glimmer of glades, retreating into dewy silences, or half-seen verge of waters moon betrayed, bringst thou this glory of enchanted eyes? Try very hard, you can do research of any duration you like, you won't find anything comparable to this anywhere in English. This is a totally different kind of poetry, and therefore instead of trying to apply to this the usual tenets of aesthetics and criticism, we must admit that we need different tools to come to terms with poetry of this kind. Since there is a lot more in this canto, I just have to content myself pointing to them, this great treasure that is lying here, and then move on, because this particular passage is a fairly long passage, nearly 2 pages long. Only Sri Aurobindo could bring up this kind of a miracle in verbal expression. Now, we go on with the story and see what happens. For that we have to skip a number of pages. On page 423, almost towards the end of page 423, Narad asks, on what high mission went her hastening wheels? Whence came she with this glory in her heart and paradise made visible in her eyes? Where had she gone that she has such glory on her face and paradise in her eyes? Where had she gone? What sudden God has met? What face supreme? What God did she meet? What supreme face did she encounter that her face is so bright? Well, next page, let us listen from Savitri what she has to say, middle of that page, and see how precise she is. Father and King, I have carried out thy will. Yes, the mission for which I was sent out has been accomplished. Father and King, I have carried out thy will. One whom I sought, I found in distant lands. Simple enough. And her father had asked her, trust your soul, and your soul will prompt you right. Therefore she says, I have obeyed my heart, I have heard its call. On the borders, now after this, some details. On the borders of a dreaming wilderness, mid Shalva's giant hills and brooding woods, in his thatched hermitage Dyumatsena dwells. She doesn't hide any facts. He is no prince. He is living in a thatched hermitage. In a thatched hermitage, Jumatsena dwells. But the fact is, blind, exiled, outcast, once a mighty king. The son of Jumatsena, Satyavan, I have met on the wild forest's lonely verge. My father, I have chosen, this is done. That's it. This is done. Now when she says this, a number of things keep happening because there is Devarshi Narad himself and Savitri's father Ashwapati, who had anticipated something of this already. Remember the benediction he gives, says you will meet this companion and you will find all fulfillment of life. But also remember, he and you have to take on the challenge of death, of this disguise, and you will have an important task to perform together. All this he had indicated very vaguely, Ashwapati himself. So he knew this, he half anticipated this, and Narad of course is Devarshi. So when she says this, he knows exactly who Satyavan is, what is awaiting their union and so on. So, but the father first speaks and says, well hast thou done, and I approve thy choice. His duty is to report it to her father, so she has done, and the father says, well hast thou done, and I approve thy choice. If this is all, then all is surely well. If there is more, then all can still be well. In double terms, if this is all, it's well. If there is some more that we don't know, you don't know, I'm sure it will all turn out very well. If this is all, then all is surely well. If there is more, then all can still be well. Whether it seem good or evil to men's eyes, only for good the secret will can work. Our destiny is written in double terms. Through nature's contraries, we draw near to God. Out of the darkness, we still grow to light. Death is our road to immortality. When Ashwapati says this, he is almost giving out the whole of it. So he is telling you, fate works in double terms. There is a surface meaning of the working of fate, and there's an inner meaning of the working of fate. And this whole idea of what fate is, how it works, how to understand the promptings of fate, the workings of fate, is a major theme in Savitri. Sri Aurobindo talks about it in various places. I read out to you earlier on, where he says, do not try to find coherence in the outward happenings of life. Outward happenings of life by themselves have no coherence. They look absolutely unrelated, uncoordinated. But whatever happens outside on the surface of life is in a response to a deep felt necessity of your inner being. It is your inner being which in fact calls these outer consequences. So it's only the inner being's growth that is the primary concern of life. And so one who is turned within and asks himself, what has this experience to do with my inner growth? Only that person will be able to find some coherence in life. Otherwise, the outward happenings in life by themselves are all incoherent. Fate makes no sense. It looks totally anarchic, but there is no anarchy in this world. There is a secret will that is working itself out. But since we are all immersed in this kind of an ignorance, it has to look as if it has two levels. One is the outer level we are conscious of, we are worried about, and then there is the inner working And this is how the fate works. So what may look immediately as something that is leading to success, to triumph, may not in the long run prove beneficial to the inner growth of a person, and whatever may look something that is leading to unhappy consequences may in the long run be something that has brought you that much closer, that brought you that much higher in your evolutionary growth and development. So fate like this, he says, it works in these double terms. Our destiny is written in double terms. Through nature's contraries, we draw near to God. Out of the darkness, we still grow to light. Death is our road to immortality. In the finite, the only way to immortality is through death. That's something Sri Aurobindo keeps saying in the life divine. As long as there is this finite, the only way to immortality in a finite form is through death. Cry woe, the world's lost voices wail, yet conquers the eternal good at last. There is nothing that is evil here. Everything in this world is either good or something which is working itself out towards good. Its present appearance may not be good, but in this God's world there cannot be any evil by itself. It is something that is now disguised that ultimately will work out. When it is fully worked out, you will find it is leading to good. And why this phase was necessary, why this suffering was necessary, this is the question that Savitri's mother is going to raise, and we'll talk about it when we take it up in the next section, next canto. Now, when he says this, Narad also talks about this, and he is about to say a little more. Then Ashwapati intervenes and says, "Oh Ashwapati, don't give human beings foreknowledge. Foreknowledge is dangerous for human beings. It is good that we don't know our future." So everybody is anxious to know your future. So if anybody can read your hand, he becomes like our friend Mr. Vaidya. I don't think there is many friends of his who haven't shown their hand to him. Please show me your hand. Tell me my future, whether I am going to be able to catch this train or not. We all want to see tomorrow. Nobody is interested in today. We all are interested in tomorrow. Tomorrow is uncertain. What is important is today. And today, the present is the eternal present. Instead of doing that, we all think of either tomorrow or yesterday. We always either feel regret for yesterday or hope for tomorrow. What about today? Who is going to live today? That's God's business. That's what is happening, either yesterday or tomorrow. And when tomorrow comes, we'll think of tomorrow again and worry about yesterday of tomorrow, that is today. But today we are thinking of tomorrow or yesterday. That's what happens to us all the time. And Narad is about to say something, but Ashwapati says, it's no use telling all these things to human beings. On page 426, Savitri's mother, who has heard what Narad had to say, "O seer, thy bright arrival has been timed to this high moment of a happy life. Then let the speech benign of griefless fears confirm this blithe conjunction of two stars and sanction joy with their celestial voice." He says, you have come here at a most auspicious time. So Savitri had just come back, and whatever she has now to tell us, or what just now revealed to us, must have an auspicious end, because you are here. It's almost a golden moment, as it were, in the life of our country of Madhya, and Savitri, I'm sure, has made the right choice, and I'm sure nothing ill toward is going to happen. Here drag not in the peril our thoughts, Let not our words create the doom they fear. Here is no cause for dread, no chance for grief, to raise her ominous head and stare at love. A single spirit in a multitude, happy is Satyavan mid earthly men, whom Savitri had chosen for her mate, and fortunate the forest hermitage, where leaving her palace and riches and a throne, my Savitri will dwell and bring in heaven. I suppose everything is going to all right. The sacrifice that Savitri is going to make, leaving behind her this palace, this kingdom, her status as a princess, and she is going to be a commoner lost in a forest hermitage. I am sure all this will be worth it. Well, she insists. You see, there is interesting. Narad really wants to say what he has come to say. In fact, he has come to say this. He has just come to announce that Satyavan has just one more year to live. But he can't just blurt it out. And particularly after Ashwapati has asked him not to say anything. So he has to say this. Why does he have to say this? Why can't he just keep his mouth shut? Well, the poet gives us hints why Narad has to say this at this point on page 429. He says, "Then cried the sage," middle of that page, "piercing the mother's heart, forcing to steal the will of Savitri." Narad has to say this at this moment, forcing Savitri to steal her will. He knows nothing that he is going to say is going to frighten or scare Savitri, but it will only help to steal her will. Because the challenge that Savitri has to face is not any ordinary human challenge. It's a challenge nobody has yet faced successfully. Nobody has even thought of facing. Nachiketa at best wanted to understand the secret of death. But go into the kingdom of death and conquer, vanquish death in death's kingdom, I don't think any human being ever has thought this would be possible. And this is what Savitri is supposed to do, and that's why she needs tremendous will. It's against the will of millions and millions of years, when death has become a habit of mankind, when suggestions of death are being thrown out at us all the time through our friends, through society, through public opinion. Why is he not dying? He's so old, this kind of thing. This, against all this, she has to steal her will. And to enable her to steal her will, that was the purpose why God of fate, as it were, chose to send Narad to that place at that point. Then cried the sage, piercing the mother's heart, forcing to steal the will of Savitri. His words set free the spring of cosmic fate. You see, Narad was not saying things merely to Savitri or merely for Ashwapati and his wife to listen to. By saying these things, he was also at an occult level setting the springs of cosmic fate free. Something that I've always been saying. Sri Aurobindo didn't write Savitri to give us a feast of poetry. He wrote Savitri, and while writing it, simultaneously in the occult level, he did something else. Savitri is a kind of a blueprint in a language that you and I understand of this golden bridge that he already has built in the occult world. And one of the byproducts of this yogic sadhana is Savitri. Exactly the same way, when Narad is now talking to Savitri or talking to Ashwapati and Ashwapati's wife, he is simultaneously doing something else in the cosmic world. He is setting free, as it were, the constraints on cosmic fate. His words set free the spring of cosmic fate. The great gods use the pain of human hearts as a sharp axe to hew their cosmic road. They squander lavishly men's blood and tears for a moment's purpose in their fateful work. This cosmic nature's balance is not ours, nor the mystic measure of our need and use. If you read it, this passage, this entire canto in a hurry as we have been doing, you are likely to miss out many, many significant details. So that's what we have done here. Narad now is going to give out the final verdict. He says, I have no doubt that Satyavan is a sapphire cutting from the sleep of heaven. Delightful is the soul of Satyavan, a ray out of the rapturous infinite, a silence waking to a hymn of joy, a divinity and kingliness gird his brow. His eyes keep a memory from a world of bliss, as brilliant as a lonely moon in heaven, gentle like the sweet bud that spring desires, pure like a stream that kisses silent banks. He takes with bright surprise spirit and sense, a living knot of golden paradise, a blue immense he leans to the longing world, time's joy borrowed out of eternity, a star of splendor or a rose of bliss. This is only a part of what Satyavan is. If you have stomach for more poetry, there is more of it down that page. Then, next page, his sweetness and his joy attract all hearts to live with his own in a glad tenancy. His strength is like a tower built to reach heaven, a Godhead quarried from the stones of life. O loss, if death into its element of which his gracious envelope was built, shatter this vase before it breathes its sweets, as if earth could not keep too long from heaven a treasure thus unique, loaned by the gods, a being so rare, of so divine a make. This is the problem. What is the problem? If in one brief year, when this bright hour flies back and perches careless on a branch of time, this sovereign glory ends, heaven lent to earth. This splendor vanishes from the immortal sky. Heaven's greatness came, but was too great to stay. 12 swift winged months are given to him and her. This day returning, Satyavan must die. Well, there is a whole series of articles on the force of this must here. Why Satyavan must die? Dr. Deshpande wrote these articles. They came in Mother India some time ago. I don't think anybody had time to read these things. So if you find old issues of Mother India, it's worth reading. Why does Sri Aurobindo say Satyavan will die? Why say must die? What is the great force of this word must? Why must he die? This is the question he raises and develops it in a very leisurely fashion. It's quite some time, and the green note came 5 minutes. I think we'll stop here and come back exactly at 11 o'clock.